Ag Committee will come to order. Clerk, if you could please take the roll.
Chair Nyer.
Here.
Representative Warks.
Here.
Leitner.
Here.
Alexander.
Here.
Fox.
Present.
Coons.
Present.
Pavlo. Pies.
Present.
Diefendorf.
Here.
Rangens.
Here.
Skaggs.
Here.
Bridges. Mr. Chair, you have 10 members present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Representative Alexander moves to adopt the meetings from the previous session with no objections. Minutes are adopted. First on the agenda, we'll take up a vote on House Bill 4917. Rep. Leitner moves to report out House Bill 4917 with recommendations. Clerk, could you call the roll?
Chair Nyer.
Yes.
Representative Warks.
Yes.
Leitner.
Yes.
Alexander.
Yes.
Fox.
Yay.
Coons.
Aye.
Pavlo. Pies. Diefendorf.
Pass.
Rangens.
No.
Skaggs.
No.
Mr. Chair, you have 6 yeas, 2 nays, 2 pass. The motion prevails.
All right. Thank you. 4917 is reported out with recommendations. With that, I would like to introduce and have come forward our folks from the, let me get the correct title, please, from our Michigan Apples. Diane, would you please come forward and proceed, please?
There we go. Hello. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm just going to give some background and some issues that are facing the Michigan apple industry, bring you up to date. Let me see. So who are we? We're the Michigan Apple Committee. We actually started as a state apple commission back in 1939, but when Public Act 232 was enacted, we became part of that and became the Michigan Apple Committee. We represent the growers in the state, and our main job is to do marketing, communications, education, and research. Our mission is to enhance the reputation of Michigan apples in everything that we do and aid in the profitability and sustainability of the industry. So, pretty big job. We have 850 family-owned farms in the state. So it's a lot of farms. We produced in 2024 1.28 billion pounds of apples. And that's on at least 17.6 million trees. And we are the second largest producer in the U.S., behind Washington State. But if you put all of our other states together, we don't equal Washington State. So we are going to always be number 2. Apples account for 71% of the cash income that's generated from fruit grown here in Michigan. So we are the largest and most valuable fruit crop in the state. And we produce apples in 80 of the 83 counties. So pretty much everywhere you can find some Michigan apples being grown. Big business, I'm preaching to the choir here when I talk about agriculture's big business for the state. Michigan apple industry, obviously we play into the economy with the trickle-down effect with allied industries and jobs that come into the state for harvest, but also are here year-round. So we constantly are, at the forefront of everything, especially the economy in a lot of rural communities. But besides labor being our number one issue, we have another really big issue, which is apple consumption. We are down 10% over the last decade. Only 12% of U.S. adults meet their daily fruit intake recommendations. Apples consumption being down is really not, there's a good explanation for it. As we all know, when we were growing up, there weren't fruits available year-round like they are now. We have a lot more competition in the produce department. So that plays into it. When you look at even bananas are down in consumption rates. So those mainstays obviously do take a little bit of a hit when you can get access to a lot of different fruits year-round. So, you know, that is probably the number one issue behind labor, is the consumption issue. Our industry has done quite a bit in terms of researching that, seeing what we could do different. We do understand that there are a lot of varieties of apples, and that can be a little confusing for some consumers. When you go into the grocery store, you see a whole shelf of a bunch of different names of apples, and they're all red, and you wonder, well, which one do I want? So that is something as an industry that we probably really should address a little bit more aggressively than we do, but you know, everybody has their favorites. And so yeah, and then conversely, you know, 56% of total expenses for a grower are labor. So we have some pretty big numbers that are hitting, and I'm going to get into the labor thing in a little more detail here. But first, I'm sure all of you have heard of AWR. It is the wage rate that's set by the Department of Labor for our workers that come into the state under the H-2A program. We do have to pay all workers this, though. It doesn't matter if they're H-2A or not. It's the set, you know, rate. Right now, we're at $18.15 an hour for harvest. And so there have been some updates, and it is in the registry for comment right now on the federal side. And starting with work orders starting October 1, so it's not taking an effect for what we harvested this year, but there are going to be some lowering of the dollar amounts, and they're going to be basing it on 2 different skill levels of workers. Most likely, apples is probably going to be in the top tier because it is a skilled labor that we need. But we do have an adjustment of housing costs, which is something we've never had before. So that alone would bring down the hourly rate because housing is required and provided for our workers. So getting into that cost of production, I mentioned that 56% of the per acre cost is labor. Looking at USDA numbers, the cost of labor for fruit and tree nut farms is at 40% nationwide. And if you put all farms together, it's 12%. So as you can see, apples, we rely on a lot of labor, and it requires a lot of money. So other expenses that are large for our growers are, of course, overhead and taxes. We expect that. Bin and storage. Irrigation is at only 1%, but also crop protection. Crop protection is obviously at 10% and a big expense also for our growers. Now let's look at grower returns. We broke this down to a 3-pound bag of apples. You can go in the grocery store, everybody can see a 3-pound bag of apples. Let's say it costs $2.99. The retailer's gonna make about $1.06 on that. The grower's gonna make 19 cents. So they're making 6% of what the sale of that bag of apples is going. There's another $1.74 that is going to the sale, the storage, the packing, the shipping of that apple to get to the retail. So when you look at only getting 19 cents, it's pretty grim at times, especially when your labor costs and everything keep rising year after year. Another area that's really important to our industry is trade and exports. We were down in 2024 by about 31%. I would attribute a lot of that to crop size and pricing market availability. Did tariffs play a part at the beginning of this year? It may have a little bit in terms of not tariffs on apples, but tariffs discussions with countries that maybe we didn't get some sales, like say in Mexico, because our numbers are down in Mexico, and that is a market that we've been aggressively trying to get. But I think mainly what we can attribute that 31% down is to pricing and the opportunity for sales in the marketplace in those markets. Central America is our #1 market, and it is down as well. And again, same reason. I would say that if you look at the 2 years before that, though, we were averaging a 400% increase in exports. And those were really like record crop years. So it just kind of makes sense that when we came back on a smaller crop year, there wasn't as much availability. Trade obviously is very important. Michigan Apples is part of a group of all the apple producing states except for Washington. We have an organization that, our U.S. Apple Export Council, that we utilize MAP dollars through the federal government, and we have representatives in different regions of the world helping us, sell the apples in those regions. One thing that we really need, though, for healthy trade and exports is Washington needs to export 30% of their crop, or it's bad news for all of us. Those apples will come either into an export market we have, great footing in, or they're going to really honestly hit the domestic market, which is going to lower price, and it's going to lower that return even more back to the growers. So we advocate quite strongly for Washington to be able to ship as many of those apples out and keep the good ones, for Michigan here for all of us. I'm going to flip around a little here to production research. We do have strong partnerships. Michigan Apples is one of the founding fathers of the Tree Fruit Commission. But we also are, have strong partnerships with Ag Bio Research and MSU Extension. Project Green is incredibly important to us. Researchers utilize the dollars that Michigan Apple funds in research to kind of use as leverage for those funds that they can receive from Project Green. So we see that as a very important partnership for our industry as we continue to do the research at Michigan State. That's where the majority of our production research is happening. One of the biggest concerns I would say with that is as researchers retire, I'm sure you've all heard this, they're not replacing positions. And that is a concern as we continue to lose that knowledge base and not getting, people back in those positions. That's incredibly detrimental to our industry. I mentioned that Michigan Apple does fund research as well. They assess themselves about $250,000 to $350,000 a year in research. So we do fund, like I said, majority production research. We do some marketing research, but that's pretty limited year to year, depending on what we might have. And so we also have strong partnerships with the USDA's specialty crop research grants, and our national organization, US Apple, works really heavily with a lot of that as well. I mentioned the investments lost of researchers. The other thing, when we see the federal cuts that happen to research, we were really concerned about, those graduate and undergraduate assistants and people that are coming up in the industry and losing the ability to kind of cultivate that next generation. That's incredibly concerning for us as we see these positions not filled and not having that talent base that's coming up with it. So that's something that we continue to watch quite closely. And then the last thing I'm going to end with is agritourism. I mean, obviously we're coming off of apple season. Everybody, it's part of our heritage to go out to farm markets and cider mills, and those organizations, they're the face to our industry, quite frankly. They're the ones that are putting a face to where their food comes from to consumers, which is incredibly important to us. We want to make sure that we're connecting with consumers on all levels, and knowing where their food comes from is incredibly important for us. It's part of our tradition. October is National Apple Month, but it's also Michigan Apple Month. And so hopefully everybody got out and had some cider and donuts and some apples. We have a lot of award-winning ciders here in the state of Michigan, not only nationally but internationally. We have a really healthy hard cider organizations coming up, so we really appreciate them and our partnerships with those people. I think one thing that I would also mention is Michigan Apples was one of the we were the first commodity group to do a partnership with Pure Michigan, and definitely has the tourism aspect to our industry. It makes sense. It was a good connection for us. I would say if, I know there's never money just floating around, but if there's ever extra money to be had, one thing that I think would be really good for specialty crops, not just apples, but all specialty crops grown here in the state of Michigan, is marketing more to our consumers right here in our state. Having a little bit more of that buying local is so important, and I think that we could do a much better job of that on a state level. And Michigan Department of Agriculture did used to have a program, Select Michigan, in the past, and other things where they could do that. Those programs have gone away, but also, who's better at selling our state? Pure Michigan. So, we see that as a potential in the future that we could find some funding to kind of have them advocate. They have the connections with resorts and hotels and visitors that are coming to our state. There's just so many opportunities, and I think that could be a really good win for us. And again, not just from an apple standpoint. I mean, I am here for apples, but I think that would be good for all the fruits and vegetables that we grow here in the state. It's not just apples that are hurting, it's all of us. So wanted to put that little plug in the back of your mind in case anything ever comes to light and you think that could be a good fit. So that is my presentation. I kept it short and sweet, kind of hit the highlights, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you. Rep. Leitner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Diane, for being here. And I know you obviously are part of the apple industry, but what I'm wondering about is you had mentioned H2A, and there have been concerns this year in the budget, some language that was in there in regards to E-Verify, and I'm just curious, one, how many of your members use H2A right now, and also have used E-Verify together, like for maybe the ongoing, not just the seasonal, because obviously they're for the seasonal. And what have you heard? Like, have there been issues with it? I'm just wondering if you can kind of let me know or let us know if there have been concerns and issues with the two together.
Okay. So E-Verify has always been a thing with our industry that we've always been okay with it as long as it had comprehensive immigration reform. But H2A, I would say the majority of our growers that are growing, large amounts of quantity of apples in the state are using H2A workers year-round. They have a higher influx coming in for harvest, but they have them year-round for pruning and other jobs that happen around the orchards. So they are being brought in from the Department of Labor. We do have some domestic workers. I don't know the stat on how many people are using E-Verify in that respect. That's something I would have to look into, but I could look into see if we can find some numbers or something that might be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a member that has used both,
Okay.
I've reached out to one stakeholder before trying to get. I just want to ask them questions on the process because obviously H2A is, a money issue, but I have heard that there's issues with E-Verify as well. Like, they're like, well, we have a H2A worker already, which is already processed through the federal government. Yes. And then we put them into the E-Verify system and it flags it. And then there's a problem. So I would like to talk to an individual grower or operator, farm operator that has done both and ask them about the processes and procedures. Now, I get that those are federal issues, but those are things that I can talk to my congressman or, Tim Walberg, Tom Barrett, whoever it may be, and, try to get some consistency there.
Yes.
Because to me, if H2A is already working, like, what's the purpose of doing another set with E-Verify that doesn't follow the same system?
Right.
So if you could have that and provide that to the committee of someone willing to talk, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I will look into that for you.
Representative Fox.
Thank you, Diane. And I think I drive past about 10 million of those 17.6 million trees on my way here
You do.
when I come down through Fruit Ridge and Sparta area. So long story short, two questions. One, I was a missionary in the Philippines for a few years, and their apples were treated very, very special because they don't raise them there. And they typically, what I was told in the Philippines was they imported them from China, and they wrapped them up in these special containers, and they were special Christmas presents given to people. Are we in the Philippine market and the Southeast Asia market?
We are breaking into the Southeast Asia market. Actually, we have a trip with some of our sales organizations planned for January. Mainly, though, we're going to Thailand, Vietnam, and maybe Malaysia. The Philippines, we do not ship there. I would have to double check. New York State might be, but Washington is for sure. And they do. Asian countries, they really, the apple is a gift for Christmas.
Treasure. It's a treasure.
It is. It is.
Yeah, okay. My second question is, as you think about your publicity, I grew up with the phrase, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Now, is that something that you still build upon, with your advertising and what have you?
We do. We have, actually, it seems extreme, we have 3 dietitians that are the official dietitians of the Michigan apple industry, and that's just because one is retiring and we're bringing some new people up into the job, so we don't normally have that many. But health is definitely one of the top things that we talk about, the health aspects of apples, and we always will continue to do that because it is incredibly important for our industry. We probably can't use that phrase because the FDA would probably come down and say, prove that. So it would be incredibly difficult. And, but yeah, we would definitely, we do quite a bit with that, including television. We do a lot of news opportunities in Chicago and in the state of Michigan talking about health benefits. We also work with retail dietitians and the major retailers across the U.S. So we push that quite a bit.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Representative Fox, Alexander, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Diane. How long have you been at Michigan Apples?
I have been there, I was hired at 5 because I've been there 30 years. So I started actually as a student, and I've held almost every job in the organization at this point. So
Very good. I know I reached out to you in 2014. I was working with you directly.
Yes.
Through some school tours and different things. You mentioned, was it PA 233 that changed your organization?
yes.
What year was that?
It was enacted in 1965.
65, okay. And just to answer your question, Honeycrisp is my favorite apple.
Good.
Which is also it's a newer variety that's extremely hard to grow. The trunks aren't that great and they don't store well. So how many varieties does Michigan grow?
We are actually known as the variety state. We grow more commercially than any other state, but I would say we really kind of tout 15 to 18 varieties. There are a lot of growers actually that do a lot of antique varieties, but we can't obviously market all of those. But
Right.
the Honeycrisp is a bit, as I refer to it as a diva in every interview I do, because she doesn't like to be grown, she doesn't like to be picked, she doesn't like to be packed, shipped, stored. She's a challenge, and we've spent quite a bit of research dollars trying to fix all of that.
Thank you. I appreciate your presentation.
You're welcome.
Representative Pies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A little bit of just being a cheerleader here. About 2 weeks ago, my husband and I went out to Yates, and for the next week, I spent apple crisp, apple cider, apple lollipops, apple butter. I got appled out, and it was terrible, but really, really good. But I did want to mention that when my husband was 19, years and years ago, he moved out to Oregon and picked apples there for a week. Mm-hmm. And the reason he stopped after a week was because it was really difficult work. And he really applauded the people who did it and did it year-round for a long time. So I just wanted to throw that out there about what tough work it is for the workers.
It really is.
And that a lot of Americans, like my husband, just couldn't deal with it.
I'll tell you, I get out there and I'll have a picking bucket on and I'll be going at it, and the workers laugh at me. I'm so slow. They're so fast. They know what they're doing. They're so skilled at it. It's a work of art. And so it is we're very, very fortunate to have such great workers that harvest our crop.
Representative Reinigans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. My question is about the H-2A visas also. So I was at a farmer roundtable in August ahead of when a lot of workers were regularly coming up from Mexico to do their regular annual temporary work here for harvesting in the fall. And there was a change in the process this year that everybody was really concerned about before it happened. And I was curious if, looking back now, was there anything that was disrupted? Things seemed to work okay?
To work okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Skaggs.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the slide on cost production and the H2As. So you say here that the new ruling will benefit growers in future seasons, and that there'll be an adjustment. And, is that because of the adjustment for housing costs?
Yeah, we'll at least have that adjustment. So that will at least lower the hourly wage down. I will say if you look at the 56% cost per acre of labor, even if we have the most extreme cut, which we don't know what it'll be yet, but if we did have the most extreme, it's only going to be a 2% difference. We're looking at 1 to 2% of that cost going down with these new, with the new AWR stuff. Our hope, though, is really to get more of the methodology behind how they figure those rates out fixed on a national level, so that maybe in the future we can continue to keep these things from going up dramatically year after year. But yeah, we're not gonna totally go down, but we're gonna be maybe a little bit, maybe $2 less or so.
So for the worker, they're going to continue to get the same housing they got in the past, but they're going to get a lower wage.
They're gonna get a lower wage, yes.
So they're going to be worse off.
Worse off, I would say. I think the allowance, the adjustment for Michigan was $1 something. So yeah, it's gonna come down. Maybe I think was it $1.30 or something like that. I think. So that would come off the hourly wage. Yes.
And is there concerns that we're going to have a labor supply problem?
As of right now, no. But I've heard from several growers that I don't know if it would be required. They can write their contracts for whatever hourly rate they're interested in paying. And a lot of these people have had the same workers year after year after year. So whether or not it will decrease for everybody, I don't know. Some of those farmers might continue to pay at the same rate that they have been, just so that they can maintain that, knowledge base of their orchards and their workers and keep them on hand, because that is important to them to have those same workers year after year.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Representative Warts.
Thank you, Chair. So one question I had, I've worked in schools on and off, and you guys used to provide apples for lunches, and I think that they're sourced locally through Michigan. Do you know if that's still happening?
Yeah, so that is the hardest place for supply that we've ever dealt with. It requires, obviously for food service, so the Gordons and the Cisco's of the world and being on the order form. And a lot of times that would just say red apple or green apple. And that was incredibly frustrating, especially if people were wanting to source local. So there are better opportunities, and I do have to say that the Gordons and the Cisco's have done a better job, and they've said Michigan red or Michigan gold. They've done a much better job of that, but I think that continues to struggle. We do have quite a few farmers that do, supply to their districts and take apples in. The logistics of that isn't for everybody, because it's taking a small load, over to a local school. But they do try to do that. And I know Grand Rapids Public Schools does a great job of sourcing Michigan apples. I mean, they're kind of in the heart of apple country, of our largest production area. But it's always a challenge to do that. And we do it wherever we can, but we're kind of at their mercy.
I would say it would be really nice if we could work on that, because the apples that get given out, when you talk about consumption decreasing, I can tell you probably it's because of the apples kids are eating, which are red delicious apples, which are at the bottom of eating quality. And so you know, then if that's a child's perspective of what an apple is, are they going to make that choice? And so how can we actually take the good quality production that we're growing in Michigan and feed it to our kids?
We did do a program at Michigan Apple where we partnered with Blue Cross Blue Shield and Wayne State, University of Michigan, and they would go in and do school tastings. So they would go into what we would do, maybe 15 to 20 schools a year, and go in with our printed pieces, and they would get to try 3 to 4 different varieties, and we would always make sure they were varieties that weren't Red Delicious. These were like varieties that, you know, people really want. So we'd go in with Fuji's, we'd go in with Jonagolds, Galas, you know, different varieties so they could have a taste of those. And then they would take something home with them at the end of the day saying, I tried these apples and this is my favorite. So they could take it home to mom and dad and say, hey, next time we go to the store, can we get some of these? So we do have that program that we do. But yeah, we need to definitely, if you ever have any ideas of how we can always make that better, we are always open to hearing them.
Last question, Representative Pies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you were talking about research, and I just wanted to clarify something. So you had said that there were problems essentially because a lot of workers were either being fired or through attrition rate. And I wanted clarification that that's during this administration, this presidential administration, and also what you're doing to make amends for that, if you will.
Sure. So, yeah, earlier in the year, USDA had a lot of cuts that were made, and that really hurt the ability for researchers to keep postdocs and different things on projects, and especially when they lost, if grants were discontinued, because those fund those positions. So that is, you know, was always a concern. Now, here in the state of Michigan, one thing we do, we have a lot of partnerships between Michigan Apple Committee, the State Horticultural Society, the Michigan Tree Fruit Commission, on doing startup packages and funding to help MSU make the case to hire more people. So anytime that we can have a partnership in that, we do. You know, we've had an extension position that's been open on the Ridge in the Sparta area for years, and we've had a really hard time filling it, and our growers need it. And honestly, the other extension people in the state need it because they need to not be spread so thin. So that is something that we have actively, and so I'm kind of a pest at MSU, and constantly I'm bringing that to their attention. So, but we do try to, when we can, put funding of our research dollars and the assessments that are collected within the fruit industry towards startup packages to help with some of those hirings.
All right. In the interest of time, we're going to end it. Thank you, Diane, for coming in and explaining the industry. Thank you for your team and taking the time. Looking forward to working with you more. With that, Representative Alexander moves to excuse all absent members. Being no objections, so moved. With no further activities, committee's done.